Good morning, Will World. um, it is Friday morning in April, and it's my favorite day of the month. Um, I'm Susan Hitchcock. Some of you may know me, remember me as the founder of Women in Leadership for TurkNet, and it is certainly a pleasure to be with you this morning. However, I'm here at the behest and request of our regular host and director of Will, Ann Quello. Some of you are very familiar with Ann and the wonderful job she's doing with Women in Leadership. Today, we're all sending her positive vibes. She's making a recovery from some shoulder surgery. And Ann, I know you're out there, so thank you for this opportunity. Get well soon, and we'll see you back on camera next month for sure, but back hopefully much better sooner than that. So today we are clearly in a wonderful place to have an expert in the field of finance, and particularly focused on women in the corporate world and women business owners, etc. But I've been told that we have perhaps the largest registration for this seminar in recorded history, and that's a long time. So kudos to our speaker. And I'm going to make an introduction to Meredith in just a moment. But I do want to just pass along. I'm one to kind of keep up with the numbers in that I did start this 20 years plus ago. And by my number count, we are at seminar number 251 today, consecutive months. So hooray for women in leadership, and looking forward to keeping this going. So without further ado, I want to formally introduce Meredith Moore. To those of you who don't know her, my suspicion is there's quite a few people on today who are familiar with Meredith. Maybe you work with her, maybe you've been to some of her events. She is wonderful in terms of sharing information and doing all kinds of speaking engagements. So my guess is some of you have been around Meredith before. But Meredith brings a wealth of knowledge at the intersection of leadership, personal finance, especially for women, and facing challenges such as brain cancer. She's the founder of Artisan Financial Strategies, LLC, and has been a financial advisor for 25 years, with a focus, as I mentioned, on financial planning for women in senior leadership in corporate America and women founders of small business. Meredith holds a Bachelor of Industrial and Systems Engineering from Georgia Tech, is a 2017 graduate of Leadership Atlanta, 2021 Atlanta Business Chronicle Woman of Influence honoree, and a member of the Entrepreneurs Organization and International Women's Forum, all of which are outstanding organizations. She's also a board member for the Atlanta Women's Foundation and Emory's Gosweta, and the Clarkston Community Health Center. She has lectured and spoken many places, many times, and that includes the Georgia Tech Scheller College of Business and Emory's Gosweta Business School. And in addition, she's spoken for the Fortune 500, 100 affinity groups. And I think many of you know and maybe have seen her TEDx Women Speaker event, which was marvelous. We're going to talk a little bit about that this morning as well. She's also a writer, rather prolific, I would say, and I look forward to her emails every week because they are so on point. Her articles on the power dynamics of money have also been published and quoted in publications such as Forbes and U.S. News and World Report. So that is just a small tidbit of the bio of Meredith. And I want to add from a personal standpoint, because I've known her for quite some time, these are four things that I know about Meredith. She's a competitive individual. She's intentional in pretty much everything she does in her relationships and the things that she engages in. By her own description, she's an extroverted introvert, which I found fascinating. And I also know, like myself, she functions well on having big, hairy, audacious goals, or BHAGs as we call them. So I know she's got some of those on her agenda for this year, but maybe we'll hear about that. But let's kick off, Meredith, and welcome. I just want to formally say welcome, welcome. This is a particular pleasure for me. Hello there, Anne.
Hey there. I'm so sorry about that. Good morning.
Good morning, and you're looking well. I think you've still recuperating. I see a strap, I believe.
Yes, yes. And so thank you so much for taking care of this morning and hosting, because
you know it's my pleasure for sure.
all right. Well, thank you.
So back to Meredith. So I want to kick off with something fun, and it's a rapid round series of questions that Anne uses, and I love this approach. So let's start with what's your favorite holiday?
Oh, geez. Okay, wasn't prepared on that one. So I'm gonna go with oh my gosh. Ooh, you got me. I guess I'm gonna say Easter. Not for like religious sentiment, but I don't know, there's something about the newness in spring, and the pollen is starting, which is not good, but you know, it's like I can get outdoors, I can begin to wear shorts unapologetically, and you know, get to it. It's something is new, and the rebirth, if you will.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
How about favorite business book and maybe non-business book?
So favorite business book, I have a couple. One, I'm a big fan of The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. I'd like to say that he's my personal development boyfriend. And also I love Traction. So for those of us that are entrepreneurs and trying to scale businesses, Traction goes over what they call the entrepreneur operating system and how to really grow a business and scale to the next level. And so I read business books all the time. And so when we were preparing for this, like thinking of a non-business book, the last non-business book I read was on the beach, and please don't judge me, but it was the Twilight series. And so consequently, um, again, please don't judge. I have 3 cats. One is name is Bella, one is Edward, and one is Emmett. So we have like the Twihard family here with 3 Twilight cats, basically.
No judgment, but I think we would love to include in the follow-up the name of the book that is your favorite. Okay, this is maybe a way out question for you, but what's the worst job ever and the best job ever?
Yeah, so the worst job ever I got fired from. So it happens to some of us at some point in time. So I waited tables at Chili's through a good bit of college, and I was actually gotten good at it, and I was going back to well, I graduated from tech. I swam for Rice University and was there, and I was going back to see friends, and I swear to God, and I swear on my mother's life, that I told the assistant manager. He says I didn't. I didn't show up for my shift because I was back in Houston. So I was fired. And you know what? I like every time I go by that Chili's, back to being competitive, I still find myself thinking that I probably make more money than he does and have a much better business than being a manager at Chili's. So that's how I emotionally deal with that sort of failure.
And your best job ever? I'm guessing I know what that might be, but
yeah, it's where I am right now. I'm able, with how I built my business, to really make it what I want. And you know, like you said, 25 years in practice, and I'll be 50 this year. So right now I've really been trying to design, like, what does the next 20, 30 years look like, to where you know, I'm doing what I want. I like to, for those that listen to my stuff, I don't talk about retirement. We talk about work optional, because we're working because we want to, not because we have to. And so how can I build my business and my role to where I'm doing the things that I love and that are my God-given talents?
And we're going to hear more about what you love and what you're so good at this morning in our conversation. So when you were growing up, what did you envision as your role or job, do you think?
Oh, I know. I still remember. I think about it a lot. I was in the 7th grade. And again, you guys are going to get a flavor of who I really am here. I don't talk about this stuff in webinars. I just knew that I wanted to be a hardcore businesswoman, that made good income. And at that time, I'm in the 7th grade. So again, please don't judge me. My concept was that I would be having a lot of affairs. So I'm laughing at myself, but yes, that was my vision at that time. I will tell you, in undergrad at Georgia Tech, I took a class from Dr. Mary Frank Fox. She and I are still friends and on Facebook together. It was the sociology of gender. And I remember contemplating at 19, as a woman, how do we have a family? And again, I had these sort of financial and lifestyle goals at that point, and how do we do that? And so I figured then it was, how can I create recurring revenues and recurring income and be able to create that? I don't like the term work-life balance. I talk about work-life integration, and how do we make that work?
Well, I do know that you made it work, and we're going to talk about that this morning a little bit as well. So, lastly, in this first section is, what would you say might be the best advice you ever got from someone?
Um, it's actually in the past 5 or 6 years. I think I've been trying so hard for a long time to network and not really knowing where to go. And I had a consultant I pay every year. She finally told me, just go make friends. That's your job, is to just go make friends. And so it took a lot of effort off me emotionally on trying so hard, and the relationships and the networking I do now is super organic, and I connect with people that, just because of who I am, not like trying to be somebody that I'm not. That being said, it's a little bit tougher in corporate, where there's a lot more politics and you have to be more who you think somebody wants you to be. But I'm in the business because of money and tabooness, and people are going to connect because they connect with me personally. And if somebody doesn't connect with me, don't hire me. And so I've had to become unapologetic about that. I can't pretend to be somebody that I'm not.
I think that's a key word, that being comfortable in your own skin and not feeling, and that being unapologetic. I
Hmm.
want to underscore that. I think that's a great place for all of us as women to be,
Hmm.
professionally and personally, of course. All
Well, and
right. Well, that
I'll
was
also say, as a dovetail to that, Susan, it makes it really easy when I go to events and I'm around, because all these people that I'm friends with, I mean, I do business with some, but not most people I don't, but it just makes it easy to hang out, and we all have similar experiences, even if we're not the same company or in the same industry.
makes a lot of sense, and you're a good example for us on that. All right. So on with the more formal interview, and the first question, which seems to make sense to sort of start off with, is, as you started your professional journey, how did you get from a Georgia Tech degree in industrial and systems engineering and into the world of finance? What
Yep.
prompted that?
So I graduated from tech in 97. And at that time, the concept of a young woman starting a small business, like, it isn't like the technology community existed at that time. While I was at tech, I was very involved in leadership stuff. So, heading, playing a big role in student government and the housing association. I was putting on events, and unbeknownst to me, the dean of students at Georgia Tech had put me up for this award, called the Student Entrepreneur of the Year. I didn't even know this thing existed. And Mr. First, who the First Center of the Arts is named after on the tech campus, showed up to this awards ceremony and gives me a check for $10,000 as this Student Entrepreneur of the Year. And that became my identity. And I never had even thought of myself like that. I was just trying to figure it out, like all of us were in undergrad. And I used some of that money to go live in South America for 6 months. Quite honestly, I was unemployable because, like, I at that time was arrogant enough to think I could always build a bigger mousetrap. And while I looked good from a leadership standpoint on paper, I suspect a lot of the big corporates recognized that and who I was. And, I knew I wanted to start my own thing. My father, who was definitely not an entrepreneur and not super ambitious, was just like, hey, you're younger, go take your risk now. Financial services was an area at that time that I was smarter than the average bear. A lot of us that had graduated from local schools were, and it was an industry that I could go into, I could get licensed, I can learn it from the ground up, and you ate what you killed. And by the way, I talk to entrepreneurs all the time. I wasn't profitable for 5 years. So for those of you who had salaries right out of school, I did not. And it was tough. I mean, did all the things that you would think in traditional financial planning are wrong because I needed capital. I liquidated an IRA. I did all the startup stuff at that time. But again, this was 97 and financial services looked very different than it is even now. So
Yeah, and certainly there weren't many women um, in that field, and especially in the big name firms. And that's changed, thank goodness. But also, I don't think there were a lot of women who were trying to do their own. So you were a pioneer, even in the late '90s and so forth. But
I was, thank you.
I do think that your example, though, of and what you shared, that um, everything, some of the younger early career women who may be on the event today, this webinar, that may be thinking that well, I should have already been this, that, and the other, and everything should be good to go out of the gate. But clearly, things don't always work out that way, and as a matter of fact, mostly they don't. So you have a ramp up, and you showed that, and you obviously have ramped way up. Okay, so let's turn to a little bit more personal side of your journey
Sure.
thus far, and that is the chapter in your own story where you found out that you had the brain tumor.
Right.
And glioblastoma, and I guess it's the formal name.
Yeah.
I know you shared this, so I'll just ask you if you don't mind to share with us this morning a little bit of the impact, the life-altering kind of experience that all had, and how you managed during that to also keep your business afloat and your family.
Absolutely. So I think as context, many on here are probably also overachievers, so we can all kind of connect with this. I feel like I had this sort of metaphorical trajectory of many of the things starting out in my business and sort of stereotypical success, and that's what I was wired, and got married, got pregnant, and everything was like moving along in my head like what I had envisioned. And
From
so
the seventh grade.
yeah, exactly. I was just thinking that I was like gonna reference it again. Like seriously, that's how things were moving along. I got pregnant and had my son, and I had him April 14th. He just celebrated his 19th birthday, so that was kind of cool. Had him April 14th in 2005. And I started getting, after I had him, started getting headaches, and went to 3 different physicians who weren't dismissive, but they were thinking I had postpartum headaches. And I knew something bigger was going on. We were consulting the Google machine and WebMD, and finally they got so bad that I went to the emergency room because I couldn't see a neurologist as a new patient for 90 days, and which speaks about what's going on in medicine. That led to the poor ER doc at what was then North Fulton Hospital, now Wellstar, is like, I'm so sorry. You have an 8 centimeter anomaly in your brain. We're admitting you right now. We're calling the neurosurgeon. Meanwhile, my mom is in chemotherapy for breast cancer. I call her and I'm like, what do I do? Like, we were friends with her oncologist for years and grew up like that. And that oncologist is like, unhook yourself, basically. Wouldn't send my dog there, go get this opinion. And so basically they knew I had this thing, and that was causing the headaches. My midline had shifted, 8 centimeters. And by the way, ladies, when it comes to brain tumors, size does not matter. It's one of those few things. Size does not matter, location matters. And so I had my first craniotomy here in Atlanta. Again, I spent hours on keynotes on this. That first craniotomy was botched. They did the best they could. I can't exactly ask for a portfolio of craniotomies, and that's brain surgery. My first surgery in my life was my C-section for my son, and that was only 6 weeks earlier. So, out of the frying pan into the fire. And we found out the pathology was really terrible. I mean, it was what they call a grade 4. They don't stage brain tumors, they grade them. And a glioblastoma is what Ted Kennedy and John McCain had. And a long-term survivor in a glioblastoma world is 5 years. Most people die within 2. Jovita Moore here locally in Atlanta, that's exactly what she had. Where I was really lucky was mine had smooth edges. And the reason that brain tumors can be so deadly is they have these tentacles and they can't be resected or taken out. Because the pathology was so bad, my then husband sought second opinions at Duke, at MD Anderson, at UMass, at multiple brain tumor centers. And again, long story short, we connected a lot better with Duke and their methodology. Again, there's a whole host of reasons. They were also very hopeful, meaning that they said at Duke, there's hope. Everywhere else I went, they kept telling me how sorry they were. And that's not how I roll. Like, I needed answers, like, let's figure this out. But I wasn't even fully there. I mean, you have to remember, my midline had shifted. And then they had me so doped up on anti-seizure meds. It was just a terrible, terrible time. But Duke redid the craniotomy, took 8 hours, and they redid it awake. So imagine awake brain surgery. Where the big joke now is, I still remember it, but I was explaining to the neurosurgeon, because they wake you up to talk, like, the importance of long-term care insurance. So it was, yeah. And I'm still friends with all those guys to this day at Duke. I still go up once a year. The conversation is more around food and Raleigh Durham than my health, because I've never had a recurrence. I'm considered one of the longest international survivors. I will say, after the awake craniotomy, Duke was fully able to resect it because the guys in Atlanta had left most of it, and we did not know that. I did a lifetime dose of radiation to my brain. Imagine frying your brain and having to move to Durham for a 6-week time period, pushing a stroller into a radiation center when you have people outside smoking that were making those decisions. It was very intense. I mean, we would sit without families. There would be some patients. We would sit in these rooms waiting to go get our brain fried or a body part fried. And I was the healthiest one. I mean, there were some really intense discussions about life and death in those rooms that were very intimate, that people hadn't even said to their spouses. So it was an intense period. And then I did a year of chemotherapy. I was still running my business. And in fact, a mutual friend of Susan and mine helped me quite a bit, and would see when I would get some calls. He would run some cases for me and make sure that I was split on them. Thankfully, my husband had decent income. And so, I was able to keep going. I did, when I finished all the radiation, though, I was still seeing clients back in Atlanta. And our calendars are the bane of our existence. I would just block a day when I knew I was going to be sick from some of the chemotherapy. And, you keep going. It's that necessity. We all have some sort of necessity to varying degrees. And I kept going, and clearly I had a great story, and I had lived the other side of my business. We talk about being sick or hurt, and our income isn't our biggest asset. If all of you think right now and think what 10 times your income is, that's probably bigger than your home, the value of your retirement account, the value of anything else. So I understood that, and I had taken all the risk management measures, but I will say my mom passed away from breast cancer when I was in the middle of chemotherapy. And that
Hmm.
was a very intense time period too. And I was there when she died in the hospital. Again, that's a whole nother webinar. And then I went through a very, very contentious divorce. And I basically left my husband, and there's a lot of reason. That's a whole nother webinar too, Susan. And we can go through why that happened, but it was a trying period for him amidst me being sick in a very different way than it was for me. So when things like this happen, I mean, it happens to the whole family and everybody experiences it differently, a different kind of trauma.
Well, I just want to say that you have to be one of the strongest people that I know, and that is a lot for any one human being. What you went through, what your mother was going through, the aftermath, and so forth. What was the time? Just one thing I was wondering.
Mhm.
When did you come out of that and start really being back to quote normal, the reasonably good health and going
Mhm.
forward? What time frame was that?
Yeah, not long before we met. So it was around 2007, 2008. And so everything was condensed in this 3-year period. And by the way, ladies, like, I don't do drama. I had a lifetime dose of drama for 3 years. And by the way, the divorce was the worst of all of it. This is
Mm.
the girl that's had an awake craniotomy, and I can tell you that the divorce was the worst of all of it. Every day was drama.
That's
And
that's really saying something, Meredith.
it
So
is.
anyway, we're glad you're past all of that, and I
Right.
do know that you stick to your plan. You go back and you're checked up, and you're still there. I
Mhm.
think one of your poster women, so to speak,
Yep.
and I know I can only imagine how many other patients, people who've been through this and are going through this, have looked to you for hope and encouragement, and thank you for all of that, because I know you are not only you're a survivor, but you share all of this to help people who might not otherwise have that kind of insight.
I do, and it's an interesting lesson because, it comes back to, from a networking standpoint, we talk about where the average of the 5 were around the most, and back to intentionality. I'm very intentional about it, but I've also found that where I put my time in that brain tumor community, I have to be careful. I mean, I've tried to be part of some support groups, and I'll have people tell me that I'm not cured and that I'm going to have a recurrence, and I don't need that in my life. I
Uh,
don't.
right.
I want to help. So the way I've been able to do it, as an example for where we all insert ourselves in terms of mentorship, is if a family needs guidance on what my experience or an experience share, I share that, and I can connect them with some of the physicians. But past that, I can't get into the day to day. I've had more people have died. And so I like to pop in and pop out and
Yep.
create
Yep.
value. It serves me. So
In all of this and everything, you have to look out for yourself. And you're
mhm.
clearly on a phenomenal path and positive path, and you clearly want to protect that. Okay, let's move on to. You have clearly established a very successful niche, if you will, in advising women, especially those who are family breadwinners.
Mhm.
So I think it's a really good question to ask you. How did you find that niche or the gap, if you will, in financial services? And something that I'm always personally interested in, if you will share some statistics and trends going on with related to women and money, because I read some things that upset me from time to time about that subject.
Right. So I became intrigued with the sociology concept because I had clients that where she was making more than he was. And I was, I think what really prompted it for me was I was seeing how decisions were made. And there are power dynamics in relationships when somebody out earns the other, and especially as it pertains to gender role. And so, because we're back to like how many of you, your mothers might have managed money, many of you, they didn't. And so while we might not be like, well, my mom didn't manage the money, I'm going to let my husband do it. Many people here, that's not how you're going to think, but it just kind of organically plays out like that. My experience has been for women senior leaders in corporate, it's a delegation thing. So I'll hear stuff like, well, he has an MBA, he likes it, I'm going to let him handle it. I had somebody that came to me a while back. She's an equity partner at a very large law firm. She was making a little over $1 million a year. That was the spirit. Stay-at-home husband, which by the way is very common when you start moving to C-suite and senior leadership. And so he handled the money. She delegated, and she was Duke Law, so it isn't like she was dumb, but he asked her for a divorce. And so she was really taken off. I mean, it was very surprising. And so she had to get up to speed very quickly. The divorce was 3 times as expensive and 3 times as long because she had never had anything to do with the money. But I became intrigued with, if she makes more than he does, she usually wants to involve him in the decision making for equality, if you will, as not to sort of upset the apple cart gender role balance. But I've seen it the other way around. If he's out earning her, I hear a lot, she doesn't really want to be involved. And you see some people falling to sort of those sociological norm defaults. And so I don't take cases unless both are involved. Now, some people are going to be involved more than others, but I mean, hell, we had 6 clients die in the past year and a half, which happens after 25 years. And if the other spouse doesn't know what's going on, like, I have to clean the mess up. So when we get these other cases, that's why I really want both people to be involved. But I became interested because I was seeing this. And so then what I did, Susan, I went out and interviewed every academic internationally, because there's only like 5 that had bodies of work and statistics around this. Now, most of them admittedly were the academics had studied what I would characterize more as lower middle class, where a lot more women were out earning men. But where I play are typically, you know, with bigger leaders and businesses and people at the vice president, SVP, C-suite level, where I was seeing, they were intrigued with my data, but I was seeing things magnified even more. In terms of stats, Susan, that I think are really important, I mean, every year we're inching up to that 50% number in terms of either single moms, or more importantly, where she's out earning him. And the impact of that is kind of recalibrating sociological norms in relationships. I was not the breadwinner in my first marriage, again, i.e. contentious divorce. I am the breadwinner in my current relationship and have been. The second big thing that may be really relevant to many of you, for those of you that have equity compensation, i.e. like RSUs, PSUs, options, you know, we talk about the wage gap, but the wage gap is much larger on equity compensation. And I have theories, again, that's probably another webinar, and I have a webinar I'm doing on taxes on equity compensation, but there's a big gap there. The other thing is, many of you are probably part of the sandwich generation. We have kids that we're supporting, but we also have aging parents. And the impact of that is, you know, there's a study that says for women 50 and older that leave their employment to care for a parent lose on average almost $325,000 in income and benefits over their lifetime. And so being able to manage that is super important. I've had clients where we have to build into their living expenses how much money we're helping mom or dad with. And by the way, if you haven't had a family meeting with your parents, don't get nauseous when you think about this, but knowing kind of where they are is very important, because it may fall to you to take care of that. I give one of the resources that TurkNet's giving out is I have a thing on sort of top financial strategies for executives, and I have in there a little bit of information on how to have that conversation with your parents so you know what's going on. If you haven't built it into your family, your personal financial plan, you may need to. So that's super important. And, you know, it's really thinking about that sandwich, the breadwinning, and then what we're thinking about in terms of the wage gap on equity comp, not just salary and bonus.
It's such an important topic and it's typically, talking about money turns out to be a pretty sensitive topic. There's religion, there's politics, and there's money. And I know in your TED talk, it was a topic, and you talked about how to talk about this with your partner and so forth. The other side of the TED talk, which some people do not know about, is it's my understanding that you may have had to rewrite your talk at the very last minute or day before delivery because it might have been a little too long. What was that like?
Yeah,
Well,
that was
what was your first of doing a TED talk, the idea of it, and so forth? How did that how was all that brought about?
so it started as a BHAG.
Mm,
It started us off like that was a clear goal that I had like 4 years before I even did it, and I had to map out like how to go about this. I had to come up with an idea that was worth sharing. And it was a whole thing. Like I did not I got TEDx Atlanta, um and that was even by happenstance. I did not get TEDx Women the first time, meaning that basically the licensee told me no, and she's like, men need to hear this talk too. And I'm like, you know what, you're not wrong. But back to the power of network. On that board were 3 friends that she didn't know that I knew. They had come through a luncheon series that I had hosted, and so they advocated for me. And then I got the thumbs up that I got this, and I was like, thought I read it wrong, but yeah, so it was super exciting. It's very black box for those of you that have a BHAG of doing a TED talk. They don't tell you the process, so being able to be nimble and going with the flow is super important, which is not one of my God-given talents. Back to intentionality, and so I had to go with the flow. And so I had my topic. They gave me a coach. I'd written it out. Again, I know my stuff pretty well. And then the licensee was like, you know what, we need to make this more accessible, not like for your clients, but like across sort of socioeconomic classes. And so they changed the topic midstream because it has to fit the production, like in terms of time and the overall theme of the TED event. And so it became how to have better conversations around money with your partner. I'm on this mission to how do we normalize, to Susan's point, how do we normalize talking about money? And yeah, so it also got cut down. The words, I mean, it got cut into, or it's almost a third of the words that we had started out with. And then where it got really dicey is you have to memorize it word for word. Many of us have done the teleprompter thing many, many times. There's none of that. It's like has to be exact to the word. So I had to cancel
wow.
all my meetings for 2 weeks in this very room, which by the way is my son, was not my old son, my son who's at college. It was his bedroom at the time. And I literally had to do it like 400 times
Wow.
because when's the last time we've had to memorize anything? What, like the third or fourth grade? Um, and and then you have the rote memorization, and then you have the intonation on top of that, and then the hand gestures. Notice I'm hand gesturing now. So there are different layers to it. And so it was probably, Susan, it was one of the top 5 experiences in my professional life, because I learned so much about myself. And when it came time to do it, I did it, but I violated one of the rules. I wore certain earrings that I didn't think were too big. They were too big. They hit the mic. I finish. I'm coming off this massive adrenaline rush and like literally sitting in a chair and then the licensee's like, you know what, we had really bad audio. You're going to have to redo this. You can either redo it now, or you can redo it at the end of the thing. Meanwhile, some of my partners at New York Life literally had taken a private jet. They had flown in, they were waiting for me at the door, and I had to redo this thing. And so, but I slayed on the redo. So that was good, but it just added to all this stress and new experiences. And back to those of us that are intentional, the other side of it is how can we go with the flow? And that was what I learned a lot about myself through that. And that's all going to work out.
You have given anyone out there who has a BHAG for doing a TED Talk that hasn't experienced this already, a lot more insight than most of us would have ever known.
Right.
I suspected some of that, but your experience has opened my eyes for sure. Let me go back to, I think we've talked a fair amount about the topic of the importance of having that conversation with your partner and with your parents and so forth. But can you just give us a few just very simple, straightforward examples of maybe how to start that conversation or lay the groundwork,
Right.
taking it out of the, oh, I don't want to do this.
Right. A lot of people, again, it's like they don't want to talk about money. Meanwhile, there's some people that are very comfortable with it. I relate it back to communication. And usually where the arguments occur are overspending, especially if you're earning an income. It's like, why should he or she be able to tell me how to spend the money that I'm earning?
Mhm.
And so, I talk about in my TED, I talk about creating a meeting cadence. And so we discuss like monthly looking at living expenses and not having one person own it, but by having two people being involved, it creates more transparency and openness, but not judging it. Looking at what you spend each month should be like getting on the scale. It's a data point. It kind of sucks doing it. And many of you on here, this has been my experience. You have no idea what you spend each month. And I'm not the budget police. Let me be very clear in my practice. But the reason we talk about knowing what your monthly spend rate is how do you know how much to have in emergency money? It's a multiple of that. If you're saving for retirement, or again, we don't like that term, work optional, because we're working because we want to, not because we have to, you have to figure out how much money you need to save to maintain that lifestyle. And if you don't know what your monthly nut is, it's critical. So monthly meeting, rotating who's looking at those living expenses. But that will lead to other conversations, because we talk about create a balance sheet. And I give that away. Again, grab the tool that Anna's so nicely put up here with the tools for, highly paid executive women.
Right.
It will help you figure out how to build a balance sheet and update that. And the reason that having that and building it together with your partner is important, it's a good way to organize where everything is in one place. Again, I've had clients die, and one lady in particular, she was single, she was a retired teacher. Several roads up in North Fulton County were named after her family. And but many people didn't know she was a hoarder. I had been in her home, and had she passed away and nobody had things organized, it would have taken them years to find everything. But as part of our scope, I build balance sheets for clients, and we were able to give the executor of the estate where everything was, pay everything out on our side. So quarterly building that balance sheet and updating it with your partner is critical. So create a weekly meeting, a monthly meeting, and a quarterly. And each cadence meeting, there's a point to meet. It doesn't have to be weird and uncomfortable. I do make a lot of wine jokes in the TED Talk around that monthly meeting, because it is uncomfortable. But if you can both get kind of on the same page, and how to not judge some of the other person's spending. Your jam may be shoes, maybe wine, maybe technology. It does not matter. But really negotiating around what's ours, where sort of expenses that I get to spend with some of my earnings, and then vice versa. So it's a communication issue, Susan, and not being afraid to have it, because the more you have it, again, if somebody asks you for a divorce, somebody gets hit by the proverbial bus, or God forbid, somebody gets sick or hurt, like what I went through, everybody's on the same page and there's a plan to address all of that.
You know, everything you just said, to me applies whether you're talking within your family circle, your partnership, but also with your parents, because, to me, the most important thing, is the fact that this is not a one and done. You don't just sit down one day and say, let's talk about it, and that's it. It's ongoing, and that is when, to me, it becomes more comfortable. And you're helping people over, a period of time, not in one day. Let's do this all. I'm going through some of this myself with it's not a parent. Unfortunately, my parents passed away many, many years ago, but I have a role with another family member, and I am the executor, and I play all of those roles, and I'm just about to start the conversation around planning for next stage. And by the way, with the parents, you haven't mentioned, I haven't heard you mention wills, but with your parents, to me, that's one important thing, is you really need to know their wishes, and I think a lot of people in their 50s and 60s with parents that are 70s and 80s and so forth don't even know what's in the will. Know where it is and who's got it, who made it. To me, that's just something that you have to address.
Well, I always say there's the documents you have, the documents you think you have, and the documents you want. And by the way, if you have a will, kudos, but a will is also a ticket to go to probate. Many of my clients, we do revocable living trusts in order to avoid probate. I had a client, he was 70, had a random accident and drowned in the Chattahoochee. Now, he had not a ton, but he had an IRA, which passes by beneficiary, so no probate there. Had a life insurance contract, passes by beneficiary, no probate there, but had an individual bank account with $3,000 in it that was not jointly titled. We had to go through probate. And by the way, that's where the estate attorneys, they get to bill per hour instead of flat fee. So it costs $5,000 in legal fees to go through probate for a flippin' $3,000 bank account. And so the estate planning is not, many of you see it as a box checking exercise. It's not just that, it's also very values based. So what I would encourage you to think also is, when we think about family intergenerational wealth, how you want to leave money to your kids. So my son went to Woodward Academy here in Atlanta, had a great private education, and we're writing big checks to Auburn University right now. God bless. But he said, I grew up, my parents didn't pay for school. They made that very clear. They were going to be traveling and they were saving for their retirement. I was very resentful around that when I was younger, but now doing what I do, I get it. And so it taught me how to hustle and do what I needed to do. And so my thinking, and I take one view in the spectrum around this in estate planning, like I have a very slow bleed of what he gets per year. I have a trust that has asset protection. So if he got sued or went through a divorce, those assets are not accessible. And he gets 4% of what's in that account. And so I don't want to create or enable a way of thinking. But conversely, I have many clients who are like, peace out, I'm dead, distribute it. If they're 30 and can't figure this out at this point, there's nothing I can do. And so neither position is right or wrong, but I moderate in planning sessions when people work with us a lot of those conversations, because the attorneys don't do that. They'll tell you what's possible, but they're drafting documents. As part of financial planning, I would argue that flow charting that and having somebody to moderate those conversations is just as important as the document drafting.
I think, you're hand in glove with the legal side of things, but all of the things you just talked about, that's another webinar, and wow, is that
Yeah.
full of information that all of us need to explore more and need to understand more. So, but thank you for those insights. That was very helpful to me personally,
Mhm.
and I'm sure to others. Okay, so now I want to ask you just a little bit about this ebook that has a very intriguing title. That's Designing Your Economic Masterpiece in a Man's World. So, how do you define economic masterpiece, first of all? And what are some of the common financial obstacles or challenges created with this for women? And how do you handle those?
So that was kind of, and I read a lot of these, and then the executive women one is a little different that I have because that's more tactical. The one that you're referring to on the economic masterpiece, that was dealing more with the breadwinners and how to have some of these financial conversations. And then what trends we're seeing if she's out earning him, and then how you can structure like who pays for what, like again, what are the sort of pitfalls in that and how to think about it. So
Hmm.
what I wrote, and the one you're referring to is more sociological. The one I did for high earning executive women is more tactical from a financial standpoint, but they're both good, but it has more to do with the power dynamics and things that we discussed and how to have those conversations with your partner.
You know, one thing that I find so beneficial in conversing with you is you are really very specific, and it goes back to your intentionality of you are so good about outlining steps, not just broadly, although you know there's that, but it's the tactical side of things that a lot of people don't get from certain other financial planners. And I think you dig into the nuts and the bolts, make it understandable and for more or less layman's terms. But it's very important that you don't just have this broad-based plan without the step-by-step and the tactical side of things. And also, there's a difference in who you're talking to, you know, at what level that individual may be, and income-wise, and stage of life.
Well, and exactly. And the biggest hiccup I see for corporate people is when you hit that level, let's just call it vice president, or you're getting ready to make that position, and now you start getting restricted stock. Um, and it becomes, I was just on a call with a client yesterday, literally they have more equity compensation than they do salary, and they can't live off the salary and bonus. So we have to come up and help them come up with a strategy on when do I sell shares? I have windows that I have to do it. And what, God help us, what about the taxes? And their advisor before weren't, and the CPA is not helping them make those decisions around the taxes. And for those of you, most of you on here are W-2s, owners get deductions, you all do not. So addressing the risk and the taxes around equity compensation is huge. And again, I also have, there's a link, I know Ann will throw it up there if you want 20 minutes with you. The equity comp piece is probably the hardest part for those of you that are W-2 that many of you haven't had guidance on properly, if at all.
That's true, and thank you for that very generous offer. I suspect there will be responses to that, and I certainly hope so. A recent podcast entitled "Financial Advisor Success Podcast," and you were a featured guest. So there was a link that we either have posted or will post. But you talked about, or how would I would like for you to talk about how much you've struggled with building and growing your business and taking it from a practice to a business. You've talked about that early on in our discussion today, but if you will, tell us a little bit more about some of the lessons you've learned and maybe some do's and don'ts, what you would do differently, you know, those kinds of things.
Right. So maybe some of you here are beginning to exit from corporate and trying to start a side hustle or a small business. We all have to decide at some point whether we want a lifestyle business or whether we want to build an enterprise business. And what happened for me, and it's called the chasm of death for any business owner, you hit a certain revenue range and you don't have capacity to bring in more clients, but to grow, you need more staff. You need more employees. So your profit shrinks. And so that's where I've been for about 3 years. So I hit $1 million of revenue and like trying to grow, trying to scale, trying to grow. And so I've been forced, like it's personal development, like all of the head stuff that we talked about in the beginning meets business knowledge. I've had to decide like, what am I trying to do? And so what we made the intentional decision is we're now trying to bring in other advisors because I'm at capacity. Now I still take clients, but my minimums have gone up and I have another advisor. And we also drew a line in the sand, which is quite honestly very bold in my industry, saying we serve women and people of color. And you can only imagine. So it's a lot of old white guys and bro dudes. That being said, I have a white guy son and I have a white guy ex-husband. So I don't have any issues with old white guys, but it's back to access. And so I decided that was not only strategic advantage. My advisor partner is a millennial Black man, and he's kind of a badass. He's one of about 25 Black CFPs in Atlanta. That's a whole nother webinar on why that's a sad state of affairs. But so that's where I am, like bringing on other advisors that align with our core values, or Michael Kitces, who I did the podcast with. By the way, that was a BHAG that I had. He's very, very well known in our industry. Or to his point, what if I just keep my top 25, get rid of everybody else, reduce my staff, and keep my profit even higher? So I've got these decisions. And so back to, we're all going through stuff. I've come to learn about myself. My God-given talents are doing stuff like this, speaking. I love marketing too. Like that's one of the things I'm very passionate about. And, I'm a good advisor, but I can pay CFPs. I do pay CFPs. I can bring in my technicals. I can do it. That doesn't mean that I love it. And so I like coming in to be aspirational and really looking at where somebody how they view money in their life to kind of create, I know it sounds silly, but self-actualization. It's like when you don't have to worry about money anymore, what are the big things now that you can do to create impact? And that's kind of where I am. And I'm still amidst, you can hear it in my voice, I'm still amidst making some of these decisions. But I mean, it's not made for the faint of heart. I mean, I got $500,000 of payroll, before I go home. And for those of you in HR, like terminating people is not pretty. I had to do one 2 weeks ago and it was really ugly. I did one last year and there was a protein shake thrown on the wall. So like all the nightmares, for those of you that are nice, happy W-2s, there's some hassles that the grass is not always greener, but we have to do big things. I mean, I feel this sort of moralistic obligation, and Susan, I mean, I'm sure you have your take on it too, where we have to set an example, we have to be a leader. I want to create impact. And so that's, life is doing hard things and figuring it out to that next level.
Great perspective for those who may be in the corporate world and either have a side thing going and plan to move into, whether it's consulting or something else where you can maybe have a product to market and sell. But there are so many things to think about. And yes, having employees adds another dimension to your role. And you can't do it without caring about people. If you don't care about people, you should not be you should not be growing your business and adding employees. But you've made it, you are clearly a very strong analyst. So you analyze and you make decisions. And it's very helpful to hear your thought process, what you've been through, what you're going through, and also recognizing that there's always change. So it's a continuum, and you will continue to have to evaluate as you scale. And there's always taking a different turn. I don't foresee you taking a different turn and going in a totally different path, because I think this is very purposeful for you. The role that you're in, the industry that you're in, and particularly the fact that you focus on women and diversity. I'm certainly I applaud you for that.
Thank
I
you.
want to
Yeah.
ask you about we talked at the beginning about your son, and congratulations on his being a war eagle, I guess, right?
Yep. I've had the undergrad situation. When I went to school, I had gotten into Rice, Penn, and Duke, and didn't want to come back to Georgia Tech. That's a whole nother webinar too. Looks very different now. Like I'm sure you know this with Agnes Scott. I mean, the median SAT at Tech is 1560, and while my son is smart, I've gotten really comfortable that he is officially at a public Alabama university, and supporting him on his path. And my child is the typical tall, good-looking white guy that loves fraternity life, and I'm like, okay, which is the antithesis of what you think of when you think of me, but he's my heart.
Well, I'm sure he's enjoying Greek life and everything that Auburn has to offer. And obviously it is a very good school, and lots of great people came out of Auburn for sure. But what would you say are just some life lessons about being a parent? And for a while you may have been a single parent, and running your business. I mean, it is not for the faint of heart. So any particular learning points that you may have not already shared about the parenting role, and also being the breadwinner and all of that?
Right. So I'll tell you, the biggest learning I had was also dealing with, for those of you that have ex-spouses, that was very difficult, and we did not get to a good place until, no joke, took 17 years, 6 weeks before his graduation. I don't know what it was. I happened to be running at the river one day. I called him because I mean, let's just be honest. Now we get to the salacious part of the webinar for those of you that are still hanging out and leaning in. So I cheated on him, and I left him for a woman. So enter my even crazier lifestyle story of made for, TV. So there was a lot of bitterness you can only imagine. And so I called him, and I don't know what got into me. And I said, I just want to apologize for what I did to contribute to some of this. And by the way, he was very culpable too. I'm not going to go into that because this is me, not him here. And for me, it released in that very moment. They say forgiving somebody is not, it's for you, it's not for the other person. And that's what happened. All of a sudden, all my angst around him just went away, and we're in a good place. But I'll say that year, the senior year, for those of you ladies who haven't experienced it, I was a hot mess. I cried most of the way through 2023. It was constant, and I was like, why am I so, like, why is this such a thing? And I guess the concept of, leaving and him doing him was just, it was harder for me than I had ever thought it would be. But it was, it was a good experience. And, looking back, like, I understand it more for me. But for those of you that are going to have a senior in the next few years, that year, be very kind to yourself, because it was really emotionally tough for me. And, and I've had to let go, back to don't grip on too hard. I would like to put him in a bubble, and I especially wanted him in a bubble because you have to remember when he was born and I got sick.
Yeah.
And like contextually, all this stuff and the nasty, nasty divorce that I went through. So that's probably contributed to my emotions that last year. And I just can't micromanage. And for those of you with teenagers, you don't know anything. You don't know jack crap. And so I've had to get them, like, people come to me and pay good money for my advice all day long, and my own child. And so I've had to I'm like, I just listen.
Haven't we all been there? Oh my goodness. Yes. You, it is unusual feeling to know that other people respect and value your advice, and those closest to you by love and birth do
Mhm.
not.
Mhm.
And you have to learn to not be too hard on yourself about backing off and not thinking and not taking it personally day in and day out. So, but to you, I say congratulations on reaching that point of forgiveness, and 2024 has got to be a really uh, very much more positive year for you, and I can tell already you're in a good place, and more good things coming your way. Something else, I want to turn the page, and this will be probably the last question that I ask, and then we'll see what our what our audience wants to ask you, because I know they do. Um, I already mentioned at the beginning that you're very active outside of your business in the community, and you've always been that way. And you and I did meet when we were both recognized back in the day before some of your more recent honors.
Mhm.
For our work supporting and advocating for women and girls. So in the various organizations that you're involved with, how do you go about deciding what to be involved in, the choices? Because Atlanta is full of wonderful charitable nonprofit organizations serving all kinds of people, underserved and needed. How do you go about deciding on your volunteer opportunities?
So I've had to learn by failure, and so I think of it, Susan, as a Venn diagram. There's what serves me personally, passion. Then there's what serves my business, professional, and then there's who am I around. So I've sat on a board before in my industry, which on a good day, most of the members were C players on a good day. I got highly, highly frustrated. And now I can't even give to that political action committee because I had such a terrible experience. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm losing so much money with my time, like spending time here. And so I vet groups and boards, who's on there, does it align with my personal passion? And like, how can I use this also to help my business in the right way? Like, not in a gross way, like you see a lot in financial services, but in the right way that aligns with who I am. So those are kind of my three frameworks. Again, I kind of think of it as a Venn diagram. And so that's why I'm involved. I'd say my biggest things right now, time-wise, I still do a lot with Leadership Atlanta alumni. I do a lot. Atlanta Women's Foundation is no joke in terms of a job, with a commitment both financially as well as time. EO Entrepreneurs Organization has really helped me grow my business, and you have to have at least $1 million of revenue to be involved. And so I've been trying to do some stuff with the board there, and that's helped me, and some of those people are my tribe as well. The other one, I call it the super secret spy women's organization, is International Women's Forum, and you have to be asked to join. And these were all of my heroes for 20 years, a little bit like you, Susan. It's like these were the people that paved the way. And Rosalind Carter started the Georgia chapter. And so anytime I can get FaceTime with people that were there to set examples well before me and get advice, that's what I need. My mom passed away in 2006, so, and she really wasn't doing what things like you, Susan and Lynn, and you guys paved the way for us. And so I want to be able to learn, because I still have a lot to learn. And being around that tribe, back to the average of the 5 you're around the most. I can't handle being in groups where we're talking about nothing. I did a post on LinkedIn about that yesterday. Just can't handle it. Yeah.
To me, one of the key things that one has to learn in one's professional life and personal life is when to say yes and when to say no. and you mentioned not liking the term, nor do I, the work-life balance term, and the integration is the same thing I've been talking about for years. I use that, and I think you do too, the same way in terms of making those choices about what community and civic organizations. It should be integrated with the rest of you, of who you are professionally and personally and so forth. So we're on the same page as far as that's concerned, for sure. Okay, well, it looks like it's a good time for us to see what's in the chat and the Q&A. So I'm going to ask Kathy or Eve, someone else in the background here. Would you join in, Kathy, maybe if you're there, and share some of the questions, and we'll take up some more of Meredith's time to answer those.
So we have gotten some great questions. I'm going to enter them in chat, and I'll read them out loud too, so everybody can see them. So the first question is, what is the most significant change in the industry between the 90s and now?
Yeah, it's very, very different. So back then it was, and many of you that are older may think of it like that. It was more sales driven, and it was very transactional. It was less planning driven. So you had what were called then brokers that would be pitching, and then you had people in the traditional life insurance channel who would be selling. And so the concept of planning and looking at taxes more and sort of this integration just simply didn't really exist then. And the life insurance channel was always looked down upon, is what I would say. And now you see so much more morphing between bank channels, what I would call the wirehouse channels, think Merrill, Morgan Stanley, and then with the insurance channels. So you're seeing a lot more sort of integrated advice. I will tell you, the advisors look different. Remember, I'm like 23, and there are guys that are like 65, and I'm coming out of Georgia Tech with an engineering undergrad. And some of these guys are not the sharpest tools in the shed, is I'm going to just be kind and put it like that. And I just wasn't connecting. And remember, I'm an out of the box kind of chick to begin with, and I didn't have mentors at that time. And I began to see very quickly why comprehensive planning was so important very early on. And, you know, I wasn't necessarily around where everybody felt that way. It was focused, they're trying to focus on sales and revenue. And even now, like, that's just not, I'm all about best interest for clients and customized advice. We want to make money. Let me be very clear. I am a capitalist, but it was just more transactional, and there were not a lot of women at that point. But that wasn't new for me, because I had come from Georgia Tech. We used to say where the odds are good, but the goods are odd. Like, there was a 3-to-1 ratio of men to women. That's why some of the guys, at least my dad's generation, would go over to Agnes Scott to find the ladies. So, yep. So you're seeing more of a shift, but I was just on a panel recently around this very thing in the industry, and we have got to do better with getting more women in the industry, because what's getting ready to change is you're getting to have this wave, this huge shift of assets that are going to pass with people that are aging. And some people, listen, there's 1,000 advisors that do women in money, but nobody does power dynamics like what I do. And I'm really trying to set my practice up. I think I've been bullish on, again, with serving women. So when some of this happens, I'm prepared and set up to be able to take those people on as clients.
You really are. What's another question, Kathy?
Okay, next question is, do you have advice for talking with your kids about money?
Yeah, very important. Actually, I built a whole resource guide. Start early, because the more you can normalize it, the better. Again, you guys heard I swam Division I at Rice before I went to Tech. I think of money like swimming. You put your kid in the pool at a very early age, so they get used to it. I started trading a portfolio with my son when he was 9. because I wanted him to get used to money. So the more that you can, whether you set up even a custodial account and go through the statement to show compound interest, whether you buy a share of Susan's old company, AT&T, and show how dividends work, I would use experiences as a way for them to experience money. But the most important thing you can do is talk about it and create experiences, because then they'll start having, they'll have a horse in the race. My son's talking already to me about buying a property down at Auburn. So like in rental income, and he's building spreadsheets. So I'm like, this is awesome.
It is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's all about normalizing it. If we don't talk about it, we don't want our kids to worry like, hey, I'm going broke. But you can have conversations. I mean, I just, so much of life comes back to the communication side. We get caught up in the technical part of finance, and that can be important too, but start just having the discussions and start getting them used to culturally saving and the importance of it. That's the other big thing.
All right, our next question leads right into what you were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get the ebook about designing your economic masterpiece and talking with kids about money?
So I'm going to add those two resources, but everybody here should definitely download that executive women one, just confirming you have that one too in there, Kathy, that we have that built in. But I'll get the Kids and Money sent to you all, as well as the economic masterpiece.
And then
I'll throw one more in. I have one too on how to run a family meeting.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I'm going to do that. That's great advice. I do want to let everyone on the call know that you're going to receive an email with all of these links that she's providing for us, as well as a link to the recording. So you can go back and listen to some of this knowledge afterwards. I know I've got to listen to this again. It's so good. All right.
It's jam-packed. It really is jam-packed.
All right. So here's my next question. I'm going to just put it in chat here. When should a young professional start planning with a financial advisor? And then how should someone choose that advisor?
It's tough when you're younger, because, so here's what I want everybody to take. Do not think it's elitism if somebody can't work with you. I'm running a business. I got $500,000 of payroll. If I'm losing money, that can't work. I mean, listen, I love to save the world every bit as much as the next person, but I want everybody to know that you also got to know that they're running a business. So it's tougher in our space if somebody doesn't have either a lot of savings or a lot of income. I'm just being real here, because nobody else is going to tell you this, but we're here for the truth telling for women in leadership. So the best thing you can do early on is you're going to have to work more transactionally. Some of the basic things that you should be thinking about is getting a boatload of life insurance. For those of you that are making over $150,000, you should supplement your disability to your group plan, and you should begin saving in, say, a Roth IRA. And it's going to be hard on the transactional side for somebody that's fee-based. And so begin creating a relationship. Ideally, I'd like to, tell you academically, it's great to get a CFP, but a lot of CFPs starting out, like, it's back to, can they afford to work with younger people? But work with a transactional person that's willing to set up a Roth, that's willing to write some life insurance. But also, the biggest thing I can tell you, both personally and professionally, is supplement your disability if you have an income over 150, because your income is your biggest asset.
Wouldn't you say, if you're talking about someone, if, let's say, starting out in less than 100,000 a year, even I would think that if you needed to or wanted to, you could pay someone for an hour of their time to help you get started. Wouldn't that be?
Yeah, but it's just, I hear you, but and you're right, but it's so few to get advice only. You have
Okay.
lots of people, I mean, me included, that charge fees, but it's still going to be like again, not our firm, but my minimums are $1 million of assets. And and then I start personally at 1,000 a month. So it's like, I already
Yeah.
know, like I can look at an intake in 2 seconds and be like, I'm going to refer them to somebody else, back to advice only. I don't Google fee only, because that's not going to get you anywhere. Google
Yeah.
advice only Atlanta advisor, and that
See what
may
you
be
get.
helpful. Yeah.
But besides that, there is a lot of information in some of the podcasts and the ebook and all of that that is provided informationally that you can start to pay attention to yourself and follow some steps, some
Yeah,
basic
absolutely.
starting investing and saving
Mhm.
and what kind of like insurance and all of that you should have.
Right.
It looks to me like Kathy, unless there's one more quick question, what do you
Yes,
think?
I do have a really good next question because it's for the older age group.
All right, well, we're going to stop after that, but go ahead.
All right, it's daunting to hear the amount of money that you need to retire. Even if you make 6 figures, that income may not happen until later in life. So how do people in their 50s morph into that realm where they can have between 500,000 and 3 million in their 401k? They can't depend on Social Security, and knowing you only have a certain amount of time to gonna get assets, it just seems insurmountable. What's your advice for people that get it later in life?
Right. So some people I find get caught up in the balance sheet, meaning the 401k has to be 3 million. For many of you that have old pensions, you would be surprised, I'm sure Susan can speak to this, on the value of having a guaranteed income stream from a pension plan. It can significantly reduce how much you need in a lump sum. The other side is, I know we run scenario and stress tests all the time. It's figuring out when, if you think about it like spigots, when do I turn on an income stream from which account? It's not insurmountable if there's some guaranteed income. The other thing is I have to level set with people, and it's a tough conversation. Not every advisor is willing to have it. Is this event, again, work optional? Like, you do not have to retire at 67 with your full Social Security, full retirement age. And so saying, hey, like in my case, I don't want to retire. I don't know what I would do. And even if I went to go sit on paid public boards, I'm not going to make as much money. So think about, how do I monetize? How do I create other streams to monetize so that if I live to 100, and I didn't even talk about that in my stats, women live longer. I mean, we stress test people to 100. Back to, you can laugh at me, but medical technology is real. I was supposed to have been dead by 2007. And it's not just me. I mean, we all know people that are living with illnesses, and it's the tech. And so figuring out how you can create other income streams, so when you leave your big high-paced corporate job, you can continue to get income in other ways. My business can monetize my passion. I don't have to be the head advisor. I can go do paid public speaking gigs. So think out of the box is what I'd say. The value of an income stream in many ways can be more valuable than the big lump sum. And by the way, food for thought for your notes, $1 million safely, you really can't draw more than $38,000 out a year for the rest of your life without running out of money. So yes, it does seem insurmountable, but if you figure 38 grand on $1 million is what you can safely draw down, how can I create additional income streams to supplement?
Great money talk, Meredith. Thank you so much. And we're going to come back in just a couple of minutes, actually, and get one more thing that you will leave with us today, and in addition to the hundreds of things you've already given us. So permit me to take just a moment and tell you all what's coming up next month. you already know every month of Will is a not to miss. So here's another one. So next month, May 17th, we have another virtual event featuring Kathy Waller, who is the executive director of Atlanta Committee for Progress and a member of several corporate boards, big boards like Delta Airlines, Beyond Meat, Cadence Bank, and CGI. She's also a member of the Board of Trustees of Spelman and the Woodruff Arts Center. She's a former CFO of Coca-Cola Company. And in that role, I'm happy to say, I invited her to speak at Will a number of years ago, and she was phenomenal then and has had so much additional experience since then. So I know that you'll want to register early and plan to be with us next month, when she will share a multitude of lessons on leadership from the intersection of corporate and community. So looking forward to that. And just one other sidebar, which is, and give me just a moment, I want to remind people of something that is in play right now at TurkNet with Christine Roberts. You've heard us talk a little bit about her program called Create Your Best Life. She's accepting a few more participants for the cohort. It is a program she created. She's a professional success coach, and this program is designed to help women live intentionally and on purpose. And whether it's a woman in leadership, senior leadership, who wants to get ahead of the game, or a younger woman or women aspiring to those roles, this program empowers women everywhere to get unstuck and to live the life they only have imagined. So if you're still thinking about that, or want to know more and want to jump in before it's too late, you can get in touch with Christine through TurkNet and Kathy Igo. So just let the office know, and they'd be happy to give you some more information. It is a very worthwhile program. Okay, back to you, Meredith. And as I said, we can't thank you enough. You're not only have given us your valuable time this morning, but so much more insight and all of the resources that you're sharing. Thank you 1,000 times. It's worth a lot of money, and we could write you a big check, but thank you for your contribution this morning. So what would be your one thing that you want to leave us with today, if you only had one more thing?
Normalize conversations around money and begin to really envision how you use money to build your best life, like what we were talking about. Doesn't take $3 million. Like, what can you do to create that intersection of what serves your passion, what serves your business, and being around the best people?
That's about as well said as anyone could say it. And I thank you for that. And I thank you for your friendship. I thank you for your professionalism. I wish your son the best at Auburn. I'm excited for him to have such a role model in his life as his mother. And for all the rest of you, we will see you hopefully virtually at least next month on May 17th. So thank you very much for being with us. And we will be back in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.